Yo, back on the freeway, cruising with ease. Project blueprints, visualizing 3D trees. Efficient movers, civil engines in the game. Riding highways, future we proclaim. East Coast banging with that rhythmic flair. Boom bap beats, neglecting sound in the air. Communicating.
Civil Engine's area tool enables users to define and customize areas by placing nodes, allowing precise control over the placement of assets. Whether using presets or any library asset, users can fine-tune spacing, offsets, and randomization to create natural or structured layouts. The tool supports multiple assets, making it ideal for placing 3D grass, trees, bushes, water, and colorful area highlights. With intuitive controls and powerful customization options, the area tool streamlines the visualization of landscapes, environmental features, and design zones in transportation and civil projects. Let's get started. All right, so we're going to start in a blank scene. To access areas, you're going to click on this icon over here on the right panel, and you'll see this pop out. And you'll see a number of areas, categories that are available. We're going to get into these other categories later, but we're going to start off with just a blank area. So I'm going to click this, and now you can see this blue sphere is attached to my cursor, and I'm going to start placing my area. And this is going to feel a lot like paths. This is kind of an extension of the paths idea, but for a coverage area rather than a linear path. So I'm going to click these nodes, and when I get to the third one, you'll see this path visualizer starts showing me where this path's going to go. So let's place 4, right click, and now we have our area. You can see what it looks like if we rotate around using our right click, right mouse button. And then from here, we can expand it by moving around the existing nodes, like so, or we can add new nodes by clicking those plus icons between them. When you're moving these around, you want to note that we want to keep this a surface area, and if we start getting complex, like going like this, it's going to be kind of like a folded, fitted sheet, and it's going to cause problems. So let's avoid that and just keep a nice area. And then to access these nodes, you can hover over them and they should show up and you can click them, or you can tab through them just like we did on the path tool. So as you tab through, it's going to go to the end and then start over again. To create a new node, you can also do expand area, which is going to pick up from the last place node when you're originally placing it, and you can add more nodes that way. All right, you can also note down here at the bottom right, we've got control over global visualizer settings. If we want to turn off the area visualizer, we can just disable it just like that. And then just also note that to access and edit the area, you're going to need to either be in the hierarchy under the areas tab, or you need to be in the area panel right here. If you're in one of these other panels, it's going to be impossible to click these nodes. In the hierarchy, you can select and organize your areas. Let's place 2 of them just so that we can see how that works. So now we have 2 placed areas. We can go to the hierarchy, we can see them. We can call this area 1, and then we'll call this one area 2. And then if we wanted, we could combine these into a folder. Now we can disable them, lock them, or delete them together. All right, so let's delete those and place another new blank area. Now I'm going to show you how the asset slots work. Again, this is going to work very similar to how paths work. And we can click that, and now we have asset slot number 1. So let's say that we want to add a pine tree forest. We can search pine tree, and you'll see we have a number of options, and we have small icons over here on the right. So if we go pine tree 1, suddenly you're going to see we've got a bunch of pine trees. It's going to try and place a default spacing, but you may want to adjust that depending on what you're trying to do. Let's get this 10 for now. But let's say that we want more diversity in our forest. We can add more trees using asset slot number 2. From here, we can go pine tree 2. You'll see these ones are much taller. We can do the same spacing or a little bit off. And then let's go to add asset slot number 3. And these ones are even taller. So now we have our pine tree forest. And now as we adjust the area, this will also dynamically adjust our forest. You may note though that some of these are going to start to look like kind of a grid, like straight lines. So what you can do is, if we go back to our hierarchy, let's rename this as pine tree forest. We can go down and we can randomize these trees. So you'll see this enable transform randomization, and this can be handled per asset slot. So we can adjust the offset. These are those small trees. You can also adjust the rotation minimum and maximum, and then also a scale minimum and maximum. So if you do this for all of your asset slots, you'll start to notice that your randomization is going to start looking more and more organic, and it's going to look and feel more like a real forest would. All right, so that's essentially the basics of how areas work. Now we're going to talk about different ways that you can place areas, and also why the presets can be valuable for you as well. So let's go ahead and delete this. And now we're in our library assets. And one thing to note about areas is there aren't as many use cases for areas as there are for paths. And that's because areas are best for more organically placed items. There just aren't a lot of scenarios where you're going to have a lot of man-made objects placed over an area in a randomized pattern. That said, we still have the ability to do it if you want to try. So on every thumbnail of every asset, you'll see there's a path icon where you can click and create a path. There's an area icon, and then there's a create area using a brush tool. If you create an area using the brush tool or the standard way by clicking points, which I just showed you, either way, you're still going to get the same area. They're just different ways to do the same thing. So this is an unlikely scenario, but let's say that we wanted to make a super quick automated city. So you'll see here we placed our nodes, and let's make it bigger. So right now it's not looking very much like a city because our spacing is off. But if we increase our spacing, it starts looking a little bit more like it. And then if we do our area fill percent, we can go down to 0, or we can all the way go up to 100. And because this is using an asset set, it randomizes them. So if we turn off our area visualizer, then you'll see it kind of looks like we've got buildings placed in city blocks. So there are very few cases where you'll want to use most of these assets, but again, that option is available. But for more common examples, you're going to want to go to these nature categories, things like cacti. If you want to place a bunch of yucca plants, you can quickly do that just like that, right from the asset library. And then from there, you can do area fill percent as 100, and you'll notice that they are in this grid pattern. And so from there, you can randomize it by going to enable transform randomization, and then you want to do offset max, and then also the rotation, you want to make sure that that's randomized as well. So by doing so, you can get a very natural distribution of your cacti. And then you could add, you'll see that we used yucca 1, we could add a second asset slot for yucca 2. And whenever you can do this, I would recommend it because it's just going to add more variety to whatever you're trying to do, which happens in the wild. And you'll also notice too that the area is going to pull the name of that first asset that you placed from the asset library. So we can delete that, go back to our library assets, and you can also do things like shrubs or trees or even rocks. Okay, so let's delete that, and let's think of a scenario where you may want more controlled placement of your area. And sometimes the point by point placement isn't always going to be the most efficient or effective for what you're trying to do. So we have this other option called create area with brush. If you click that, now you have this brush tool. And now we can click, and what it's doing, and you want to make sure to hold down control, is it's placing like a paintbrush where those objects are going to show up. But this is actually an improved implementation of a brush tool over other methods, because once it's placed, you still have a lot of control over it. So let's push this kind of in a random way. Assume maybe we're going around buildings, or we're avoiding median curb island. So now we're going to do that, and you'll see nothing happened because right now we're just previewing. And you can also adjust the brush size. So maybe we want to push out a more precision in one area. We can do that. And if this looks like kind of pixelated, it's nothing to worry about because you're not going to see that once the asset's placed. This is just where those assets are going to be placed once you confirm this. And so we can preview changes. And now you can see this is where the edges of our area is going to be. And then once we're done, we can confirm changes. You can also adjust the shape accuracy, which is going to give more or less resolution around the edges. For most situations, 1 or 2 should be fine. And then we just go to confirm changes. And now the brilliance of this system is this isn't some different type of placement. This is an area just like all the others. It's going to show up in the areas hierarchy. It can be edited just like any other area. There's just going to be a lot more nodes because you place them using that brush tool. So in most scenarios, I'd recommend just using a standard area placement, just because you're not going to have as many nodes to deal with. But this feature is available for those scenarios where you do want more control. And once this area is placed, it behaves just like any other area. We can adjust our fill percentage, we can adjust our spacing, our randomization, and so on. And so feel free to play around with that. And when you turn off the area visualizer, then you're also not going to see that anymore, especially once you jump to other areas of the UI. I'm going to manually place a blank area again, just to show how the brush placement can be used to place initially, but it also can be used to edit. And it can be used to edit areas that were placed initially using the brush tool, or areas that were placed using point by point. So we already talked about the expand area, which picks up wherever you left off, and you can continue to place those nodes. But you can switch to enter brush mode. And now if you hold down Control, we can push out the areas or the edges of that area using the brush mode. So brush is great for initially placing areas, but it's also really nice for expanding areas that were previously placed either using the brush mode or just the standard area placement system. From here, everything's going to be just the same. You want to preview changes, and then if you're happy with everything, you can confirm changes. You can see here we've got this node out here. Let's just delete that, and then we've got our area. All right, so now we can move to brush presets, and just like paths, these are for your own convenience, but they can all be edited. So we've got a few different types of trees. We've got beech, maple, pine. We've also got a few shrub, and we've got a crops one here in the vegetation. So you're welcome to play with these and mess around with them, adjust them. And these are just a really quick and easy way to place trees, but this is improved upon just placing them from the asset library because we've got multiple asset slots filled. And the same can be true for any of these presets. And so it's a much quicker way to place a variety of trees. You can see we've got different tree models here. So you get a lot more variety much more quickly if you use these presets. The same is true for maple or pine. And for pine, that was the first example we started with. We can just do it with a preset and we're going to get the same results much more quickly. Also, several different types of shrub. And then we have crops. And this is a generic term, but you can use this if you want to place something that looks kind of like farmland, like a wheat field, or even from a distance, something like a cornfield. And you could go customize this if you wanted to make it look taller. You can just uncheck that and make the z-axis 4. Now it's going to be stretched out, but it's going to look much taller. Or maybe you want it all to be expanded. You could adjust all of those parameters in addition to the spacing. Continuing on, we have the 3D grass. And this is one of the most useful parts of the area system because while we do have a number of realistic textures in our texture library, there's just nothing that replaces actual 3D grass. And so we can place it like this, and you'll see here, it's a little spotty. Maybe it's something you want to look more organic, something out in nature. But if you want something that's fully fleshed out, then all you have to do is change the area fill percent to 100, and then you do have that full grass look. Just a warning and a precaution, this is going to be very taxing on your GPU, and it uses something called nanite, which means when you zoom out, you're going to start to see them disappear, and you zoom in, they come back. It's kind of a level of detail sort of thing. And so if you're rendering and you want them all to appear from far away, you can force that by going to settings, going to visibility, and it has nanite enabled. If you turn that off, it's going to force that all on. But again, just be mindful that your graphics card will be possibly severely punished because of that. So let's delete that type of grass and show that we also have this Kentucky. And then if you want a different type of grass, then we also have other options. By going to this drop down, you'll see they're all kind of next to each other. So we place the fescue, but we also have a brown type. You can also do, we also have spacing adjustments, which is kind of in addition to the fill percentage. And then we've just got a number of other different types of grass. So feel free to play around with those and see which one you like best or which looks best for your setting. But again, just be mindful that once you get a lot of grass, it's going to have a big effect on your performance. And so one thing that you could always do is place all your grass using areas, and then either turn them off manually or put them in a folder and turn them all off together when you're working, and then only turn them on right before rendering. So let's say that we have a couple different types of grass. They're going to show up in our areas, and we can organize them together by selecting them both, wrap with folder. And now if we're working and it's slowing us down, we can just turn that off and then turn them on when we're ready for our rendering or a presentation, whatever it is that we are doing. The last type of grass is this rye, which is just more sparse, something more organic. All right, the next area is highlights, and we're going to cover that later on. So we're going to next go to collections. Now what collections is, it's kind of like the presets that we showed already for something like trees, but instead of just trees, we've got a number of assets that might make up a forest, for example. And so this is a quick way to place a foresty area. So you can see here we've got several different tree types, and they're oak trees, but then we've also got grass and we've got rocks. So if you want to place a forest really quickly and you're not too worried about it being perfect, then this collection is just for you. And then the same goes for the other ones. This is a desert. I'm from the desert personally, so I got to make sure that we got this one in here. Got some Joshua trees, some rocks, some creosote bushes, and then we've got jungle, which is just a collection of some of our more tropical types of vegetation. In the other category, we've got rocks, and then we've got water. And there are a number of different ways to place water. This is one of them. And just so you know, once you place that fourth node, it starts to kind of get these panels. And so there might be scenarios I found when you just kind of want to do a triangle, make sure it covers your area, then you're not going to have the changes that you see here. And then also, I want to go and find a tree. Let's find a nice palm tree. Place it in our water. You'll see the water doesn't look that realistic by default, but if we go select it, then we can go to more settings here, and then we can turn on high quality water. And now you can see we've got some really nice reflections going on. And we have multiple types, lake, river, and ocean. And then we can also adjust the texture scale from really small to something really big. All right, and then finally, we're going to go to area highlights. And these are available under any area that you place. So let's place a tree area like this. You'll see we have this area, but it's only going to show up as long as we've got this area visualizer. But we can go and force that on all the time by going to custom visualizer. And then from here, we can make it whatever color we want to. And now, even when we turn off the area visualizer, that's going to stay on. So that's one option. You're probably not going to use it very much, but that's how you can kind of manually create it. You could also do the same just by going and placing a blank area and then customizing your visualizer from there. But maybe the fastest way is just to use our highlight presets. So let's delete these ones and go here. You'll see here we've got lines highlights, which is something like maybe for construction. We've got triangle highlights, and then we've got dot highlights. So these are the presets, but like every other preset, they can be customized based on what you're trying to do. So let's say that we go back to this orange lines, again, maybe construction staging. We can go here, and then we've got a ton of options. So we can adjust the scale and the speed. We can also adjust the rotation. And then we just have a ton of different options for the pattern type. So, and these are the same for path visualizers, pathway arrows as well. So we have over 20 different kinds, and some of these might be self-explanatory, but others, maybe they're going to be useful in a situation like where in CAD you're using a hatching. You could do the same thing here in Civil Engine to try and draw attention to different parts of your project. Also, we've got some different types of stars, and then we've got water droplets. And so you could even show water flow if you wanted to, and then you can adjust the rotation based on where you're trying to show the water flow. So a number of different options to use these area visualizers, the area highlight tool. So we recommend doing that to draw attention to various elements of your project. All right, so I've opened this North Valley's Middle example project to kind of show how areas work in the real world. You can access this and some of the other larger example projects by going to the example project section and clicking this More Example Projects button down here at the bottom. And let's turn off our landscaping trees so that we can kind of work on a blank slate. And it's also a good time to note some of the limitations of the area system. So again, if we go to a blank one and we turn on our area visualizer, then you can see that we're going to not exactly get a flat area visualizer. There's just no way for the area to be able to calculate all of those points, and so it does have to get an approximation. And so we do have a few options. You can go to surface snapping and turn that on or off, and then you can adjust the surface offset, and this also will give you some control over where that area shows up. So let's turn on some assets. Let's go back to this panel, add asset slot, and then let's go to our pine tree example. So you can see here that the pine trees do a better job of following the surface than the area visualizer. And so for some of these more terrain areas, large objects like trees are going to work well, but more defined objects like smaller trees or grass or area visualizers may struggle and may need to be broken up into smaller pieces. So if I turn off the area visualizer, you can see we've got pretty good results going on here, and we can make all the adjustments. They're going to follow the surface. We can go underneath and kind of see what's going on. And then we can also do what we did before, but with the surface snapping here. And so now they're going to push all the way through. So we most commonly want the surface snapping to be on. So let's delete this and let's try this with like grass. So if we go to our grass preset and we do fescue, let's follow that same area and see what we get. All right, so now as we zoom in, we're getting actually pretty good results. You're not going to see it from a distance because the issue I showed with the nanite, you can always go to visibility and turn that off. Then it's going to force that highest level of detail and everything's going to slow down real bad. But grass actually did a pretty good job in this scenario. And from here, we can further customize it. If you see the surface snapping, you're going to see it's just trying to go, now it's just flat on the ground below. And so we definitely don't want that. You're going to need to be careful though in some areas, because imagine that we were doing grass under a bridge, then the grass has to decide, does it want to go under the bridge or above the bridge? And if you're trying to do both with one area, then you're going to get it confused. So this is going to be a bad example, but let's place it. And so you can see here that grass, it's trying to drape on whatever surface is there. And so any area where you've got stuff above it is going to cause you some problems, especially if you want the stuff below and the stuff above. And then another thing to note too is if you import an asset as just an imported asset versus a base model, it's also not going to track that. So if you did have a bridge, you might want to import it as an asset, then you're not going to have that issue, though it also wouldn't track things like traffic placement. So just make sure to understand those limitations. All right, for this final example, we're looking at another one of our example projects, and we're going to go to our areas and go to our presets, go to highlight lines, and show how if we want to do kind of a construction staging area highlight, I just want to show what happens when we place it using these parameters. So by default, you can see here, it's going to kind of be up above, and then we can go to this and go to surface snapping. And now it's trying to figure out what surface to snap to, but it's kind of confused, and you can adjust the height offset. And part of this might be more complex because we've got a bunch of base models and a bunch of phasing. But I show this because the better way to handle this is probably just to break it up into smaller pieces. So let's delete that. And now we want to do it just on the flat surface areas. And you can also snap. And then each of these can be edited separately to try and get the best results. So we've got surface snapping on here, and then we can just bring it up. And I believe this might be in centimeters, which isn't super consistent, but just so you know, and then we can try and line it up with some of the other ones. So by breaking up into smaller pieces, you might have more success than just doing it all in one shot.
The grids are Kansas mental systems align. Blueprinting realities and zones we define. From station to station, the city's pulse we trace. Elevating ideas, reshaping urban space. In the heart of
all right, so that does it for the area system. Join me in the next video as I talk about advanced traffic.
over the city's hoop. Skyscrapers standing tall, testament to our drive. In a world of asphalt jungles, watch our visions. We're architects of the fast lane, visions unfolding. Pioneering past with the future in involvement. Neon signs got